This really has been a long time coming, but I'm finally moving off the forward superstructure and starting to work on a new area of the ship. Today I'll be starting the construction of the bases for the funnels. There are two bases that I need to build, one for the forward funnel and one for the aft funnel. For the forward funnel, there's this square-shaped base that I need to install this front plate on and then replace these wing structures with photo-etch. The photo-etch comes in two parts, the sides and then a roof that entirely replaces those parts. And there's a much nicer grating on the side than the rather chunky plastic that comes with the kit. I'll also be replacing the hatches with photo-etch, so they'll need to be removed during this phase of the construction. As for the aft funnels base, that's a slightly simpler structure, although it is bigger. Once again, I need to install panels on the sides of the base with the details. Once again, the plastic for the gratings needs to be replaced with photo-etch. So I will dig that out and install photo-etch in its place. To begin, I need to prepare the plastic parts. After removing them from the sprue, I'll file and sand off any excess plastic. There's a little bit of flashing on the base of these components, so I need to run them over a flat sheet of sandpaper like this just to remove that flashing and ensure that I have a nice flat base. As for the excess plastic on the other edges of the part, that's really just the connection points to the sprue. So I just file those off with a bar file and then sand the edge smooth. The details for the sides of this base are printed on separate panels that need to be glued in place. This is an indicator of an older style kit that isn't using a slide mold technique where this kind of detail could be directly printed onto the sides of these larger components. For these long panels that go on the side of the structure, there's a plastic grating that I want to remove. I want to dig it out because I want the photo-etch grating that I'm going to be replacing this plastic with to sit recessed into this gap such that the face of the photo-etch is level with the edge of the plastic. To dig out the plastic grating, I use a bar file. I'm not really concerned about the finish of the underlying plastic. What I'm most concerned about is that the edges are nice and square. The cleanup of the parts for the smaller base is very similar to the cleanup for the larger base. In this case, there are only two sides that I need to clean up. The other two are going to be replaced with photo-etch, so I can ignore those. Now that all the plastic parts are prepared, I can glue them together. I'm gluing them together using Trumpeter extra thin plastic cement. This is the rapid setting variety. It really does work very well. After applying the glue, I set the parts aside to dry for a while. Once the glue is set, I need to address the base of these components, especially this one. It isn't very even. There's a section where some of the parts are actually taller than others. So I need to focus on sanding one area of the base. That's why I kind of sand it half on, half off the sandpaper. I'm trying to make sure that the base is consistently level across the entire length of the component. Once I'm happy that the base is level, I can then work on fixing some of the defects on the side of the components where these panels join together. I want to eliminate those seam lines. There's also some detail that I need to remove on this component. These hatches are going to also be replaced with photo-etch, so I can remove them as well. When removing these hatches, because they are close to some portholes, I'm trying to be quite careful to not damage the wriggles. Because in this case, these wriggles are actually pretty finely detailed, so I don't need to replace them with photo-etch. I also am running a bit short on photo-etch wriggles, so I can't replace every wriggle with photo-etch at this point. To fill the seams, I apply plastic putty using a toothpick. I don't need to put on a lot of putty, I just need to put on enough putty to fill the gap. The less putty I put on now, the better, because the less I'll have to remove at a later point. After leaving the putty to cure, I can then remove it. I start by removing the majority of the excess using a bar file. Once I've removed the excess putty using the bar file, I then clean up the surface using a 400 grit sanding sponge. This part is now ready for its photo-etch. The most prominent photo-etch on this part are these long sections of grating that go on either side of it. In addition to the long sections of grating, there are also two small sections of grating that go on the end. After removing the photo-etch gratings, I then install them. Start with these smaller sections, which I place into their gaps that I had previously dug out. They fit in quite nice and snugly, so once positioned, I glue them in place using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire. I repeat the process for the other small grating and then move on to the long gratings. Long grating is marginally more difficult to install. It is a bigger piece and it does have a slight curve to it. It just seems to be the nature of this photo etch. It's unfortunately not perfectly flat, but it's a relatively simple component, so installation isn't difficult. Before I started gluing down the components, I did make sure that it properly fits within this gap that I dug out for it. So I know that if I position it in one corner correctly and I then start gluing it down, the other end will fit in place and there won't be any issues. Once again, I glue it down using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire. I am being careful to try and not get super glue into the actual grating, because then it will clog the holes and ruin the effect of the grating. We will see how successful I've been at avoiding the grating when I paint. I repeat the process on the other side of the structure to install the other long grating. After applying the glue, since I was applying it to the edge, there is a little bit of super glue that sits on top of the plastic and on the edge of the photo etch. I want to remove that super glue to ensure that I have a perfectly smooth surface, so I give it a quick light sanding with 400 grit sandpaper. That is all the photo etch that goes on to the larger structure. So now I'll move on to the smaller structure. Here, the most prominent photo etch are these wing structures. It's an entire replacement of a plastic part. It has these walls and a roof that need to be glued together. After removing the photo etch from their fret, I fold the walls into shape. To install the walls onto the ceiling, I apply a small drop of extra thick super glue to the top of the walls and then gently put it in contact with the ceiling. Before the super glue dries, I carefully reposition the walls to ensure that they are correctly aligned with the etching in the ceiling. Once the walls are correctly positioned, I then firmly bond them in place using additional extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire from the inside of the structure so that the glue is not visible. And then repeat the process for the other side of the ship. This base structure also has some hatches that need to be reinstalled. I had previously removed the plastic hatches. I'm using the smaller variety of hatch that comes with the FlyHawk kit. There's not enough space for the larger hatch, so these will have to do. I fold them using tweezers, and then while holding them closed, I glue them together using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire to the edges of the part. Of the two variety of hatches that come with the FlyHawk kit, these ones are considerably easier to fold. The other one doesn't align properly. They're very irritating. Once folded, because there's quite a large cavity underneath these doors, I apply quite a large drop of extra thick super glue to the surface, and then I place the hatch on top of the extra thick super glue and quickly maneuver it into position before the super glue sets. Next, I glue in place the photo etch wing structures. This I'm going to do in phases. I'm going to first lightly tack it in place because I want to actually apply the glue from the inside, but I also need to make sure that the base is flat across the entire width of the component. That means I need to glue these wings in place while they are on a flat surface, which means I can't access it from underneath, which is what I need to do to be able to put the glue in on the inside. So I start by applying a little bit of extra thick super glue to the top of the plastic structure, and then I gently put and position the photo etch wing in place. Once that's done, I can lift it off the table and apply extra thick super glue to the inside of the structure to permanently bond it in place. This way I can be sure that the part will be properly positioned and have a flat base across the entire width of the component while securely gluing it in place by applying glue to the inside of the structure so that it's not visible. I repeat the process on the other side. This time I use extra thin super glue. I don't think it was really necessary to use extra thick super glue. And if I apply it using my super glue applicator, I can put quite a lot of this glue on very quickly, and it works just as well. It's a little bit easier to use extra thin super glue actually. That is where I'm going to end this video. In the next video, I'm going to continue with the construction. There's a bit more detail that needs to go on the sides of these components, primarily focusing around the larger one. There's a motorboat workshop and a MFDF structure that goes on the forward and aft of the larger aft base of the funnel. I will build those structures in the next video, and it'll also be the return of me having to modify some components because, well, once again, we are finding some corrections that need to be made to this model. If you would like to support this channel or see how this ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.